My 1974 Beetle behind me on the ramp here is leaking oil yet again. So let's see if we can get it fixed. Volkswagen Beetles are prone to oil leaks. The general rule is if there's no oil under them, there's no oil in them. And the reason behind that is because there are a count of 29 oil seals on these engines which can go wrong. 16 pushrod tube seals, the sump plate gasket, rocker cover gaskets, oil pressure relief ports, the oil pump. And then you have the crankshaft main seal, and you have 4 seals on the oil cooler on the other side of the engine as well. And in the case of this car, you also have the oil filter and you have the associated pipework for that. And there's a sand seal pulley on it as well. So this even has more than the 29 that I would count off the top of my head. So yeah, they are prone to leaks. The solution to this, of course, is to make sure that you get good quality seals when you're putting the engine together in the first instance, and that you basically keep on top of the maintenance. But it is kind of an inevitability that you will end up with seal leaking and stuff like that as well. Now, in the case of this, what I found is, after looking around the car and finding that everything was oil soaked, I sprayed it all down with brake cleaner to try and find out where the leak was coming from, and it turned out it was coming from one of the pushrod tube seals. The problem with the pushrod tube seals is, in order to replace it correctly, you need to take the engine out and take the cylinder head off, and I'm not doing that now. I will do it in the future, but for the time being what I'm doing is I'm going to do a temporary fix on it, which involves using a telescopic pushrod tube into one location that's actually leaking, and then in the future I can come back around and do that pushrod tube then. It's pretty obvious when you look around the heat exchanger here that the pushrod tube seal is gone, but if you actually look up at the pushrod tube itself, it's the exhaust one on number 3 cylinder up there, and you can see the seal is actually blown out of it. So what we need to do is we need to take off this plate, this piece of tinware here, and get ourselves a bit of access, and we need to take the rocker cover off and take the rocker shaft out and take the pushrod out. So we're going to get stuck in and do that now. Okay, so the tinware in this is actually just held in with these cap head bolts. Now I won't be able to get the one up there, so we just kind of have to bend it down out of the way, unfortunately, but look, it is what it is. So this one actually has a nut on it. Fortunately they're all oil soaked, so it's easy enough to get them out. There are a few of the oil leakage points on a Beetle that can be repaired without taking the engine out. For example, the rocker covers, the sump plate, the oil pump, that kind of thing. But unfortunately, because of the design of the Type 1 engine, the pushrod tubes are actually held in place by the clamping pressure of the cylinder head. So you'd have to take the head off in order to get them off. But in order to get the head off a Beetle, you have to take the engine out. Now everybody says, oh, you get the engine out in half an hour on one of these. Yeah, if you had a pit crew and that, you probably would, yeah. But normally, it's a pain in the face taking the engine out. Yeah, granted, it's easier than many other cars, but it's still a pain in the face. So that's why I don't want to do this right now. I just want to get the car back on the road, and maybe over the winter I might do it, when the car is shored up anyway. Just get that wire out of the way. It's just for my... I'm using an oil temperature sender that goes into the plug for the, it takes the place of the plug for the oil pressure relief port there. So it means that you're getting a true oil temperature reading as to what's actually going to the bearings, which is the most important temperature you need to know. So now we're going to just bend these down out of the way. And then that allows us to take this down out of the way. So now next thing we're going to do is we're going to get a rocker cover off. Now on a standard Beetle, that would be a case of just pulling down the bail wire and then it just pops off. But in this, there's actually 2 bolts that hold it on. 13mm bolts up here. And while I'm in here, I'm going to replace the rocker cover gasket as well. I have a spare as well, which I'm going to throw onto it. You're just looking, there's 2 oil seals on the on the bolts here as well. So that's more oil seals in this engine. Okay. So now, that gives us access to the rocker shaft. I just noticed part of the pushrod tube seal is actually here in the... There you go. There's the smoking gun if ever you needed it. So, geez, there's no giving those valves at all. I actually think they might be too tight as well. So we'll be adjusting them anyway as part of this job. So let's get those 2 standoffs off there now, and then that'll allow us to take our rocker shaft out. These standoffs are 15mm. But if you didn't have the bolt-on rocker covers, you would be using the they'd be 13mm bolts. So we're going to just back these off evenly. Okay. And there's our rocker shaft out. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our push rod out. And that's this lad here. You're going to find it's full of oil because it is what carries the oil into the heads. So I'm going to just give these a bit of a wipe, and then we'll set about actually removing the offending pushrod tube. So really now all you can do is actually just rip this pushrod tube out. And this is the reason why you have to take the pushrod itself out, because otherwise you'd break it. So I'm going to put a piece of strapping around it, and we're going to just pull it out. And what you can do is you could get a piece of tie a knot in it and then use a pry bar to actually pry it out. But I'm hoping I don't have to do that. Well, that came out and smacked me square in the middle of the forehead. Terrific. Right, okay. Now. Okay, here is the new pushrod tube, which is, I actually assembled it off camera. Now, I'm actually going to take it apart and show you what the story is with it. So you have these conical rubber seals, which go either end, and they're supported with a washer. This is one of the scat ones, by the way. So they have an internal spring. So you have two washers, two steel washers, and then two seals. And inside here, there's your spring. And there are very small O-rings, and I'm putting 3 of those small O-rings on here as well. And that's going to create the seal between the inner and outer layer of this pushrod tube. So we push that back on, and then our washer goes there. And then our conical seal goes here with the taper facing out. And same story on this end. And then that basically allows you to compress it in, put it in and release it. And the idea is it's supposed to seal. Probably won't. Alright, so you'll see on the pushrod tube that there is a narrow end and a wider end. The narrow end goes in towards the crankcase and the wider end goes out towards the head. And just put a little bit of oil on the O-rings. And what we have to do now is, well, most of you guys won't have to step around the camera to do this, but I do. So put it up into the crankcase first of all. And that's it, it's in. So that will hopefully do the trick anyway. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean everything down with a bit of brake clean, and we're going to get a rocker shaft back in, and we're going to adjust the valves. And I'm going to do the valves on both sides. Alright, so now it's time to stick our rocker shaft back on. The important thing here to remember is that you have to make sure that your push rods, well, are in first of all. If I put the push rod back in. Right, okay, so that's in now. Just make sure they're seated in the followers down below. And now we can put this on and make sure that the rockers are sitting correctly on the push rods. All right, so they're fully tight now, and you will see that the push rods are sitting correctly in the cups on the rockers. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start adjusting them. Right, so all the valves are now adjusted. All of them were tight, as in way too tight. To be honest with you, there was no clearance on some of them. So definitely needed to be done, and something that was probably overlooked a little bit too long. So anyway, it's done now, and I can get the new rocker cover seals on and start reassembling everything, and then we can start it up and make sure everything is as it should be. That did not sound good. Wally. I had the distributor cap loosened so that I could see which plug it was firing on. Now it should fire. Sounds like the alternator's rubbing on the fan shroud as well. Another job I want to do now is I bought an airflow meter. I want to just see if the carbs are reasonably in balance. So I'm going to just throw it on there now and see how they're looking. Fan shroud is rubbing all right. I'll adjust it after. That's 4. That's 4.5, and that's just under 4, so we just bring that up a little bit. Right, that's bang on now. That's ticking over lovely now. Just a little bit of a tweak on the carbs is all that was needed there anyway. But I know people said those telescopic pushrod tubes are shite, but Jesus, leaking already. Great. Back on the ramp it is, so. Bloody hell, I mean it's leaking just as bad as the old stupid pushrod tube. You know what you can do sometimes with these type of seals is just get a channel locks or pliers or something on it and just give it a little twist, and that kind of seats the seal. So I'm going to try that now. Alright, we're just going to have to start the engine and see if it leaks again now. Now we wait. It's weird, it's not in gear but the wheels are still turning. So obviously just slipping the gearbox. One thing I will say is it's ticking over lovely and smooth now after adjusting the valves and rebalancing the carburetors. I had to tweak the idle mixture screw ever so slightly on number 2 cylinder, and that just made all the difference. The whole thing settled out into a lovely idle there now, so I'm really happy with that. And I'm not seeing any oil drips now, so fingers crossed. God damn it. It is actually better, believe it or not, but it's still not ideal. Right, this is why I left it on the ramp. Right, what I'm going to do now is take the pushrod tube out again, which is really annoying because I have to take the rocker shaft out and all that, and put some Permatex on the seal because that's bloody useless. Alright, one costume change later and 5 minutes of engine running, and the seal seems to be holding up a little bit better. Yes, there's a little bit of leakage, but I think I'm just going to have to live with a little bit of it. The thing about it is that I know telescopic pushrod tubes do leak, but I did not expect it to leak as badly as it did. In the end, I actually didn't have to use the Permatex. What I did was I used the pliers to pull back the pushrod tube far enough so that I could just spray some kind of solvent in around it and just get everything a little bit cleaner. I'd say there might have been a bit of grit on the seal or something like that. But it's holding its own, and until I can drop the engine, I think I'm just going to have to live with it. But anyway, look, yeah, as a short-term measure, yeah, absolutely, you can go with the telescopic pushrod tubes. But as a long-term solution, no, definitely not. So anyway, look, I hope you got something from this video, and yeah, I'll keep you updated with my progress, and I will chat to you soon. Thanks for watching.